A killer confesses. The chilling crimes of Joe Metheny. Baltimore, 1996. A grimy diner. The smell of stale coffee and greasy food hung in the air. Joe Metheny, a burly, bearded man, sat across from a police detective. He had a story to tell. A confession. He spoke of murder, of unimaginable brutality, and then the most shocking revelation. He had fed his victims to unsuspecting customers at his barbecue stand. Detective Jim Trainum listened, a knot of dread forming in his stomach. This wasn't just another homicide. This was something far more sinister. Metheny's words painted a horrifying picture, a grotesque tapestry of violence and depravity. Trainum had seen his fair share of darkness, but this was different. This was pure evil. Metheny's confession sent shockwaves through Baltimore. This wasn't just a killer, but a monster who had preyed on the vulnerable, turning their flesh into food for profit. The city held its breath, caught in the grip of terror and disbelief. Who was this man? What drove him to such unspeakable acts? The answers, as they unfolded, were more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Joe Metheny's life was a breeding ground for darkness. Born into poverty and neglect, he never stood a chance. His childhood home was a battlefield of addiction and violence. His father, an alcoholic, was absent for most of his life. His mother, overwhelmed and struggling with her own demons, couldn't provide the love and support a young boy needed. School offered no solace. Metheny struggled to keep up, his mind clouded by the chaos at home. He fell behind, becoming an easy target for bullies. The violence he experienced at home spilled into the schoolyard, and he soon learned that the only way to survive was to fight back. With each act of aggression, the darkness within him grew. By the time he was a teenager, Metheny was already deeply involved in drugs and alcohol. The substances offered a temporary escape from the pain and anger that consumed him, but they also fueled his rage, making him unpredictable and dangerous. A stint in the army did little to straighten him out. Instead, it exposed him to the horrors of war, further numbing him to violence. Years later, Metheny found himself adrift. He drifted from job to job, his life a blur of substance abuse and fleeting connections. Then, he met Kathy Ann Magaziner. She was different. She offered him companionship, a sense of stability he desperately craved, but their relationship was tumultuous, marked by Metheny's possessive nature and violent outbursts. When Magaziner disappeared without a trace, suspicion immediately fell on Metheny. He claimed she had run away, tired of his lifestyle. But the police weren't convinced. They suspected foul play, but without a body they couldn't build a case. Metheny, knowing he had evaded justice, grew bolder, his rage festering beneath the surface. Driven by a twisted sense of betrayal and fueled by drugs, Metheny began to spiral further into violence. He frequented areas known for prostitution and drugs, targeting those he believed were disposable, those society wouldn't miss. He lured them back to his makeshift camp under a nearby bridge, a desolate stretch of land that would become his killing ground. The area under the bridge was a place of shadows and secrets, hidden from the prying eyes of the city above. It was here that Metheny committed his most horrific acts. He would overpower his victims, their desperate pleas for mercy drowned out by the roar of traffic overhead. He showed no remorse, no hesitation. Each life he took pushed him further down a path of no return. But Metheny's depravity didn't end with murder. Driven by a grotesque sense of practicality and a chilling lack of empathy, he began to see his victims as a macabre source of profit. He dismembered their bodies, grinding their flesh and mixing it with pork. He then sold this gruesome concoction at his barbecue stand, located near a busy truck stop. Unsuspecting customers, drawn in by the smell of barbecue and the promise of a hearty meal, unknowingly consumed the remains of Metheny's victims. The thought was unbearable, a chilling testament to the depths of his depravity. But for Metheny it was simply a means to an end, a way to dispose of evidence and turn a profit.